Joan by Carol M Mottershead, Chapter 6. Date 20th of April 1979. Dear Diary, I've never done this before, but today I decided to start the diary as Dr. Goodwin requested. What do I write about, though? I've always been a private person. I've had to be. Do I write about what I do each day? Or does he want me to only write about my thoughts, my dreams? To be honest, I'm wondering if I really need to see him again. If my mind can't cope with whatever I'm blocking out, maybe it would be best to leave well alone. Maybe I'm not meant to remember. Then again, he did say a memory can't hurt me. I've already survived the real thing. I can't promise to write anew every day, because my life isn't that eventful these days, especially now I'm on my own. It's just work, home, with the occasional visit with Alison. Oh, Nicholas, I miss you so much. Where are you? I thought I dreamt about you last night. Your eyes were so close up to my face. I'm sure they were your eyes. I don't know where else I can start searching for you. I've tried everywhere I can think of. The electoral registers, the General Medical Council in case you were working as a doctor. I've even searched any and all alternative medicine registers that I could find, but nothing. It's the Queen's birthday tomorrow. I thought I'd seen you in the audience on her birthday a couple of years ago when she held a private party for her Silver Jubilee. Family only. Elvis was there. And the stage lights, they blinded me for a moment. And when my eyes cleared, you were gone. Probably my imagination. But I can sense you're alive. You're near. I'm sure you are near. I'm so sure of it. Date 21st of April 1979. Dear Diary, Happy birthday, Your Majesty. I've been busy today performing shows for the kiddies. It's been great. I love performing to the children. They're so full of vitality. I love to hear them laughing and shouting at the puppets. Mr. Punch's silliness has been annoying me more than usual. I find myself feeling really angry at him. My puppet hits him harder than usual. I've been having strange dreams as well since my last session with Dr. Goodwin. The same eyes as last night, close up in front of my face. A face without any features, just the eyes. I think they're Nicholas's eyes, but they have a worried look about them. I don't feel frightened by them. Not exactly. Just unsettled and edgy. Date 26th of April 1979. Dear Diary, sorry I haven't written in you for a few days. Nothing to report really. Strange dreams that leave me feeling unsettled, but I can't remember them long enough to write them down. Alison came round for a chat today. I was telling her about my strange dreams. I've had that one about guillotines again. She wants me to ring Dr. Goodwin, but I don't want to waste his time talking about my dreams. They're just dreams after all. She was getting insistent, and I found myself getting unusually annoyed at her for being so pushy. Why can't life be as simple as it was when I was young? I remember when my life really began. It was my wedding day. a day I'd never dared to even dream of. I fell in love with Pulcinella almost at first sight. He was the first person to really treat me like a lady and not a child. He had such a cheeky grin, and when he looked at me with those disarming eyes, so full of excitement, as if every day was a pleasure to be alive, he made my heart want to leap for joy. I thought the feelings were only my own, but when he confessed to love for me to father, when we agreed to marry, I made myself a promise. My marriage was going to be different to that of my parents. For one, we were going to be happy, a happy family. And two, we would have lots and lots of children and live by the sea like Grandmama. I didn't want any of my children to feel the loneliness I had felt. That was my promise to my future self. Our wedding was a day I'd never forget. A grand affair with all our family and friends. Everyone who was anyone had been invited. Servants were preparing decorations, and people had been arriving for days in advance. Our home was full to bursting with excitement. But I was worried. There had been no sign of Pulcinella. Unexpectedly, it was Father who reassured me that he would turn up. I wasn't sure if that was because he now believed Pulcinella was worthy to be called his son-in-law, or if it was because he would send out the servants to collect him if he didn't. I knew Father so little that he was an enigma to me even after all these years as his child. That morning, I awoke with ecstatic trepidation. My whole life was about to change. I couldn't stop smiling at the thought of seeing Pulcinella again. Governess had been fussing over me all morning. Eat, bathe, dress. I wasn't sure who was the most nervous. There was still no sign of Pulcinella, and I kept asking the servants to check if he'd arrived. They must have been so sick of me asking. Despite her own misgivings about Pulcinella, Governess kept telling me to stop worrying and focus on getting ready for the biggest day of my life. She spent ages intertwining newly woven ribbons in my hair, creating riglets that cascaded down my back and over my shoulders, then placed on my head a gold chain headdress with its single diamond teardrop that she'd worn at her own wedding. Just as Father arrived carrying a large, decoratively carved wooden chest, which he had laid on the floor in front of me, indicating, with a gesture and a look in his eyes that I couldn't quite decipher, that I should open the box. For a fleeting moment I thought Father had done something to Pulcinella, but Governess urged me to open the box, looking a little excited at the prospect. In the chest was my mother's wedding dress. It was beautiful. At that moment I wanted to cry. In her own way, Mother would be with me after all. The dress was a delicate shade of green velvet, trimmed with red and gold along the edges of the squared neckline, the long flowing sleeves, and the hood. A red and gold sash to go around my waist to complement the outfit. I was overawed with emotions. Alice and Delia, two of the maid-servants who I had grown up with, were my bridesmaids, along with cousin Polly. They all helped me to dress, being careful not to disturb my hair, tying laces at the back, shoes on, and a quick check that everything was in place, and I was ready. "Just one more thing," Father said, taking a small box from his pocket and opening it. A chain fell out. "This was your mother's." Governess lifted my hair and Father fastened the necklace around my neck. It had on it an ornate golden cross set with 4 emeralds, one at each apex and a ruby in the centre. It was lovely, but how could I wear a cross? It represented everything I was angry at. governess handed me a cornucopia-shaped basket of winter roses, and father turned me round to look in the mirror, and for a moment I imagined mother standing next to him, just smiling, and I knew she would have approved. A tear threatened, but I remembered what she used to tell me when I was nervous and had to perform in front of our guests. Take a deep breath, brush yourself down, and put on a smile. Your audience awaits. I looked once more into the mirror, and for the first time in my life, I felt beautiful. The look of pride on father's face told me everything else. Together we walked down the staircase to the great hall that led to the chapel doors where all the guests were gathered. Father made one last half-teasing attempt to change my mind, telling me if I had any doubts I could still back out, hope in his voice. Despite the kaleidoscope of butterflies in my stomach working overtime, I shook my head and smiled. The guests stepped aside, creating an aisle for us to walk down. At first I couldn't see Pulcinella, and I started to get worried. Then as we neared the chapel doors, I saw first the priest, then Pulcinella. He wore a green woolen jacket with a gold floral pattern woven into it. A black cloth belt hung round his waist, and black pantaloons. We looked the perfect match. If only I knew then what I know now, for the tears that had threatened to breach their banks all morning finally broke. Tears of joy, or tears for what was to come. The priest noisily cleared his throat to bring the congregation to attention. Polly took the flowers from me as the priest asked, "Who giveth away this woman?" To which father replied, "I do." Then reluctantly passed my hand to Pulcinella and wouldn't let go. Pulcinella took my hand from him and the other from my side and was about to kiss them when he saw the disapproving look in father's eyes. Their silent communications were interrupted by the priest asking, "Do you take this woman to be your bride?" "I do," answered Pulcinella, beaming at me. However, it hadn't gone unnoticed for those nearest that he gave a quick, cheeky wink at his friends in the congregation, and I thought they were going to applaud for one nerve-wracking moment. "Are there any objections to the joining of these two people?" asked the priest. There were one or two clearing of throats from Pulcinella's side of the church. His friends were obviously intent on being playful throughout the wedding. Our vows spoken, rings blessed and exchanged, we were finally pronounced husband and wife. This time when Pulcinella took both my hands in his and looked over at father, he smiled. In hindsight I can't help wondering if it was he challenging father, or was he just looking for approval? I didn't know, but he turned to me with such love and sincerity in his eyes, and began kissing my hands so tenderly, lengthily, lovingly. I didn't care. I had seen father's nod in what looked like approval, and I also noticed a tear in his eye. Although he pretended to be brushing away a speck of dust when he saw me looking, I just smiled at him. It was too late. I'd already seen it. I'd only seen father cry twice. Once when mother passed away, and again at her funeral. It tugged at my heart to think of mother again. She would have been so proud. I smiled as I imagined her standing there next to father, then looked back at Pulcinella. There's something about the way he looked at me that made me feel special, as if I were the only person in the room that mattered. A smile passed between us. We were man and wife. He was my husband. The doors of the chapel were opened, and we were all entered for the marriage service. It was a nuptial mass. We would both receive the body and blood of Christ. Wine is only given to Catholics on special occasions such as marriage. I started to panic at the thought of receiving Holy Communion. Would I be struck down by lightning? I had taken confession with the priest the day before and told him of my concerns, how I felt about God and my anger towards him for taking my mother. As for penance, he gave me 10 Our Fathers and 10 Hail Marys. I couldn't believe it. I had been racked with guilt over my anger, mentally punishing myself these past few years. How could saying 10 Our Fathers and 10 Hail Marys absolve me of such a sin? I felt hypocritical continuing with the marriage in church, but it was what Father and Governess wanted. It meant so much to them to see our marriage blessed by God. But for me, the vows we made to each other was more than enough. They were from our hearts, our vows, our promises to each other, and that was all that mattered, wasn't it? The celebrations were fantastic. Father supplied the food and drink, for which everyone was grateful. Guests presented their gifts of varying kinds, and Pulcinella's family, his fellow actors, gave the best gifts of all, themselves, their skills as entertainers, and they were amazing. We had jugglers, fire performers, stilt walkers, magicians, and plenty of music for dancing all through the day and into the night. There was so much joviality, and everyone seemed to enjoy themselves. Pulcinella and I were introduced to so many interesting people. I can't remember them all, but one person in particular did stand out more to me than any other. He wasn't exactly a young man, but not old either. His name was John D, and he was renowned for being an alchemist, and from the bits of conversation I overheard, I'd say he was a very good storyteller also. He was different somehow. A strangely worldly look about him, wise beyond his years. You'd best describe his enigmatic and eccentric personality. Very knowledgeable. He spoke of strange things, planets, angels, and something about an elixir which I found all very entertaining, and would probably have listened more intently if I hadn't already another distraction on my mind. A new husband by my side, a new life to look forward to, and more frighteningly a night of unknown activities to concern myself about. It would be many, many years later before I wished I had listened more closely to his stories. By the end of the day, most of the guests had retired to their beds, with only a few stragglers, mainly Pulcinella's friends, who were used to late-night carousing, still enjoying a drink or two. Father had taken Pulcinella into the library for a chat, a serious look on his face. Governess, bridesmaids, and I retired to the marital chamber where I was prepared to receive my husband. I felt like everyone was looking at us, at me, as we left the room. I was so embarrassed. I already felt anxious about the night ahead. I didn't know what would be expected of me, or what I was supposed to do. Mother would have been able to advise me. I missed her so. My bedroom had been transformed for the occasion, decorated with flowers and candles, a fire in the hearth, and a warming pan in the bed. Reluctantly, I allowed Alice and Delia to help me out of my dress. It was so beautiful, and I felt so close to Mother with it on. I didn't want to take it off. If only she could have been there. Polly helped me into a delicately embroidered nightdress that laced up at the back, and I sat in front of the mirror for Governess to remove my headdress and ribbons before brushing my hair. I fell asleep writing in my diary, and fell into a dreamlike state reliving that long ago first night with Pulcinella. "How are you feeling, my sweet?" asked Governess, as she brushed my hair. "Nervous. What's it going to be like? Will it hurt? What do I do? I asked anxiously. You do whatever your husband asks of you, my dear. It may hurt a little, but it'll be over in an instant, laughed Gardners. Like having a baby. You don't remember the pain afterwards, she said. Anyway, don't you worry. Your father is most likely having a similar talk with Pulcinella right now. You know how protective he can be. She laughed, a smile of reassurance reflected in the mirror. The bridesmaids finished tidying the room, closing the shutters on the windows just as Pulcinella knocked on the door and entered the room. I rose to my feet to face him, but lowered my eyes, embarrassed, as I noticed the appreciative look he gave me from across the room. My heart started racing. My breathing quickened. I blushed, redder than a robin's redbreast. Gardners promptly left the room, giving a mock evil eye in Pulcinella's direction. I had seen her reflection in the mirror by the door and noticed she was smiling. I started smiling. What are you smiling about? Asked Pulcinella, approaching me with his hands held out towards me. He took both my hands in his as always and kissed each one lovingly. He pulled me closer, and the sudden closeness of his body took my breath away with his musky smell of maleness. Breathless and anxious, I dared to put my arms around his body and hold him close. I'd never held anyone close since Mother. The bittersweet yet tender memory of Mother came to mind. I pushed melancholy thoughts away and focused my attention on my new husband. The tenseness of my body relaxed as he stroked my hair lovingly, and I closed my eyes, savouring his touch. My whole body tingled with excitement. I dared not move, not knowing what to do. Pulcinella took hold of my shoulders and held me away from him for a moment. He stood, just looking at me. I wondered what he was looking for. Did I not please him? Not knowing what else to do, I smiled, remembering what a wise old woman once told me when she said anyone could look young and beautiful with a smile. As we stood facing one another, I noticed for the first time that Pulcinella looked nervous. He smiled his smile confidently and placed his arms around my body as we shared our first tender kiss. His lips touching mine, soft and gentle, like a butterfly's touch. I longed for more. My body became alive with anticipation. My breathing quickened, the tingling of my whole body grew stronger and more intense with every teasing kiss. He pulled his head away from mine for an instant, then looking down at me, he started kissing every feature of my face. His lips tenderly touched my eyes, my nose, my mouth, tantalizing me, making my body long for more. My lips, my cheeks, my chin. I could only look on nervously as my heart continued beating loudly in my now heaving breasts. My body yearned for more. I wanted to lean in and hold him as closely as two people could be. I wondered if I should. Was it my place to make that move? I was his wife. He was my husband. What could be more appropriate? I remembered what Gardners had said earlier. You do whatever your husband wants you to do. I need not have worried. Pulcinella's kisses grew more passionate. I could feel the controlled longing in his touch as he held me close. His hands moved to cradle my neck. Another kiss. He began loosening the ties on my nightdress. As each piece was undone, he looked into my eyes to make sure I was all right, to make sure I was in agreement with what he wanted. My whole body began shivering with anticipation. "You're cold?" he asked. I shook my head. He took my hands and placed them on his chest. I realised what he wanted for me to do the same to him. I did as I was asked. I eased his jacket from his shoulders and let it drop to the floor underneath. He wore a woolen shirt, tied from the neck and down his chest. I untied the strapping as far as it would go. His skin was warm from the wool, in contrast to my own cooling flesh from the cold winter air. I leaned in to kiss his bare flesh, feel the warmth of his body, the yearning growing. He kissed my neck as his hands moved across my body, gently easing my nightdress from my shoulders and letting it fall to the floor. I was naked before him as he reached out to remove his own shirt over his head, letting it fall to the floor. My shyness gone, embarrassment was now a thing of the past as Pulcinella scooped me up into his arms and placed me gently onto our marital bed. Climbing in beside me, he pulled the covers over us both for warmth against the cold winter's night, and held me close. My heart was racing, my breathing grew faster with excitement and anticipation. He pulled back the covers to look at me, his naked bride. Then he started to laugh and jumped out of bed quickly. I was mortified. "What are you laughing at?" I cried. I felt foolish and pulled the covers back up under my neck, embarrassed and ashamed. Still laughing, Pulcinella jumped out of bed and stood back to show me. "I still have my trousers on," he cried, laughing and quickly undressing before climbing back into bed. "Ouch! Hot, hot, hot," he said. "Now what?" "The bed warmer. Oh, you'll have to kiss it better," he said, smiling a cheeky smile. "There's a lot I would do for love, but I won't do that." We both laughed as he jokingly put his toe in my face for me to kiss better. It was quite a while before either of us could stop laughing, but the laughter took away any remaining embarrassment either of us were feeling that night. It makes me smile even now to remember our early attempts at love-making. Pulcinella was no one I would ever be afraid of. He made me laugh. He made me happy. We were on a cloud. "Now, where were we?" he smiled, removing the warming pan from the bed. "Oh, yes." Pulcinella eased back the bed covers to take another look at me, smiling and nodding approvingly. He climbed back into bed, grinning from ear to ear. We started to kiss once again, as he eased his body closer and closer to mine. "Oops, missed." Pulcinella spoke aloud to himself. "Missed what?" "Oh, nothing," he laughed, placing his finger to my lips to silence any further questions. The kissing resumed, and as I felt the weight of his body on top of mine, I suddenly realised what he had been referring to, and giggled to myself, silenced only by the unexpected intake of breath as his manhood pierced his target. Our bodies as close as any two bodies could be. I paused for a moment. "What is it?" he asked between kisses. "What am I supposed to do?" I asked. "Whatever your body feels it wants to do, I guess. Now let me concentrate," he smiled. "What are you doing?" He seemed to be fidgeting under the blankets. "It's dark down here." And we both started laughing once again. "Maybe we should rest a while, since neither of us seem able to stop laughing," I suggested, smiling. I was happy just to feel the closeness of his warm body next to mine. The laughter had interrupted the feelings of arousal that had begun, so for a short while we just talked, our hands still drifting across each other's bodies as we did so. Then suddenly he jumped out of bed and started rummaging around in his belongings that had been brought up to my room earlier in the day. "What are you looking for?" I asked. Here it is. It's all right. I've found it." he exclaimed, and brought back a guitar and clambered into the bed. "I've written a song for you as my wedding gift to you," he announced proudly. "Come on then, let's hear it," I said, sitting up straight and pulling the covers round us. "I was inspired to write it after speaking with your father that first time he asked me about my intentions. It goes something like this. I won't promise I can give you money. I won't promise I can give you gold. But I'll give you love that lasts forever. A love that warms you though the nights are cold. On the days when you feel lonely, a helpless little girl, I'll be standing by to give you all the love in the world. All the love in the world. I may not have the look of immortality. I don't have the strength of Hercules. Pinchoir and Darius may leave me standing. Can't see the logic of Archimedes. But I have in my possession more valuable than pearls. And I freely want to give you all the love in the world. All the love in the world. Sailing on the ship of your dreams, you can be anything you want to be. Traveling to faraway lands, you can be anything you want to be. I listened to the words he had written for me, and was overwhelmed with such longing. Pulcinella quickly put down the instrument and waited for my response. "It's lovely," I said. We began kissing. "You liked it then?" he asked, grinning from ear to ear. The kisses that were once soft and gentle grew more passionate with longing for what we were about to attempt once again. By morning, I would be a child no more. For tonight, I would become a woman. The next morning was the first day of the rest of our lives. Pulcinella was resting on his elbows, watching me when I opened my eyes, a smile on his face, looking down at me as I slept. "Good morning, wife." "Good morning, husband." And Pulcinella leaned over to kiss me. "I've been watching you since light of day," he said. "I can't believe we're actually married, Joan, that you actually wanted to marry me, that you're actually my wife. I promised, Joan, with all my heart to make you the happiest woman alive. I want to stop this moment in time and freeze it for eternity. No, I beg you, don't." I put a finger to his lips. "I thank you for your sentiments, and I know you mean what you say right now. But make no promises, please, for your promise makes me your prisoner, and I your jailer. But no, I beseech you, please, don't make me your jailer, for you will come to resent me, and I would hate that." Pulcinella took on a serious look. "Your father took me into the library last night. I wondered what that was about. What did he want?" "He took me into the library. A fire was already ablaze in the hearth. He ordered me to sit, which I did so. You know how intimidating your father can be." I just nodded. "He told me quite adamantly he didn't like me, but I already knew that. He thinks me a rogue, a vagabond. He thinks I'm after your money." "What money? All I have is the dowry father gives to you for taking me off his hands." I laughed. "Well, I want you to know that my intentions to you are honourable. It is you I love, and despite what your father thinks of me, I will always be by your side, care for you, look after you and keep you safe. Then," and Pulcinella blushed. "Why are you blushing?" I smiled. "Well, it got a little embarrassing when he asked me." "Asked you what?" I laughed. "Well, he asked me if I knew what to do in the bedroom department." "In the bedroom department? I'm sure I don't know what you mean," I teased, pulling him to me for another kiss. We had just started kissing when there was a knock on the door. It was Governess. "I thought you two lovebirds might have built up an appetite, so I brought you breakfast," she said. Embarrassed, I pulled up the sheets to hide my nakedness. It was nothing Governess hadn't seen before whilst helping me to bathe, but it felt different somehow. I need not have worried, though, for Governess just carried on as if it was a normal day, opening curtains, choosing which clothes to be worn, and then she stopped short as she noticed the two of us just sitting there, smiling. Governess smiled awkwardly, realization crossing her face suddenly that I was no longer her little one. I was a married woman in bed with my husband. The look of embarrassment on her face was a picture. She left the room hurriedly. A tear could be seen starting in her eye as she did so. Breakfast was served and waiting. We looked at one another again, and all thought of food was forgotten as our morning started, as our night had ended, filled only with love and the promise of a future full of happiness. It was late morning before we both felt ready to face the world. Alice and Delia took away the bed linen that were, whilst we ravenously devoured the breakfast brought to our room by Governess early that morning. The final ritual was complete, proof of consummation of our marriage. We would finally be permitted to depart on our honeymoon as man and wife. We were to spend a month, full month, by the sea at Grandmamma's. I was so looking forward to showing Pulcinella around my favourite places, as well as visiting with Grandmamma. She had been unable to attend the wedding, so there would be so much to tell her. Pulcinella and I had so much to learn about each other, about his way of life with commedia dell'arte, and what would be expected of me in my new world. What would be my duties? Baggages were placed in the carriage. Tearful goodbyes were spoken to all those that mattered. We set out on our journey together, waving till we were out of sight. As the waving ended and we turned round to sit comfortably, I looked at Pulcinella. Inside, I felt something rise up in me, something I had been suppressing for some time. The tears flowed. Pulcinella put an arm round me, asking no questions. Silently, he held me to him and waited. I didn't think the tears were going to stop. I was so overwhelmed with a whole mix of feelings. Excitement? That went without saying. Fear. Embarking on a new style of life would be strange and scary for anyone who was used to hard work, let alone myself, who had never worked a day in my life. And sorrow. How long would it be before I would see Father again, or any other familiar faces once our honeymoon was over? The tears finally stopped. I turned to Pulcinella. "I'm scared," I told him. "You need not be afraid, my love. I am near. I will be here." He quoted our vows and lay my head to rest on his chest as he held me close, and I fell asleep. 6th of May 1979. Dear Diary, I had a good night's sleep, but woke suddenly with angry eyes close up in front of my face. has left me feeling shaken, a little scared and unsettled. They were Pulsinella's eyes this time. Why am I seeing eyes, let alone angry eyes? It's every time I try to remember the good times with Pulsinella that I end up dreaming about eyes. What are they trying to tell me? When we were first together, Pulsinella was the kindest person I knew. He rarely looked serious for long. It was one of the traits I loved about him. Nothing else to report today. 9th of May, 1979. Dear Diary, I've had a couple of days just chilling out. The weather has been very pleasant for this time of year. I've been writing up a new routine for my newest puppet, Margaret. She's going to give Baby a Mr. Whippy ice cream, but won't have any left to give to Mr. Punch. So he will take it off Baby, and they'll have a bit of a kerfuffle with the ice cream, ending up in Mr. Punch's face. Yes, I think that will be the way to do it. The kids will love it. I've had a couple of good nights' sleep and feel well rested and calm. I guess using the basic inductions from Dr. Goodwin will work best on me. I'm due to use the one that allows me to go back to a good memory. The one that's intended to kickstart my brain. I hope I don't have any nasty dreams this time. 10th of May, 1979. Dear Diary, I think last night's induction must be working. I'm not sure if I like it though. It all started off very well with a good memory. I was remembering our honeymoon. We spent a lot of our time learning as much as we could about each other. Pulsinella prepared me for our future lives together by telling me what it would be like as travelling performers, and I felt sure I would love it. For my first performance, I still wore a mask like everyone else. Mine was a sort of half mask, covering my eyes and half my face. It meant I could join in the fun and not be embarrassed performing in front of the public, which was great. I was allowed to play the big bass drum. It was nerve-wracking. I thought beating a drum would be simple, but I was so nervous that I found keeping the beat wasn't so easy. Made harder by people shouting loudly at us, "Get on with it!" The impatient, noisy crowd had formed a ring around the wagon that was used as a backdrop for the play, but started settling down as the clowns entered with their slapstick comedy. Then when the actors came out, wearing their colourful clothes and strange-looking masks to begin their comical word-mongering, the audience hushed, apart from the occasional heckle from someone in the crowd. The audience loved the hilarious antics of the various physical performers, jugglers, fire performers and acrobats, etc. When the play finally ended, I got to beat my drum again, whilst the actors left the performance area and the bottlers walked amongst the crowd collecting donations in their large earthen jars. I was thoroughly exhausted when we finished, but excited too. I couldn't stop chattering. It took me most of the night to calm down. Then, before I knew it, it was time to wake up. I loved the attention of it all. For the first time ever, I felt like I belonged. Pulsinella's family accepted me as one of their own right from the start, and I was happy. I finally had friends. Getting used to the long journeys was tough to begin with, especially following late nights celebrating the end of a week's work and early starts onto the next town or village. It took me quite some time to get into a routine, but Pulsinella was patient with me, especially on the days I'd overslept and he had to pack everything away around me. The players seemed to have their own philosophy: work hard, play hard, and rest when you can. Their ideas of playing hard consisted of drinking or laughing and chattering mindlessly till they dropped. I wouldn't call myself a snob, but whenever I got the chance, I would leave Pulsinella to enjoy joking with his friends and take myself off and just read silently. Governess had given me a couple of her favourite books, and Father had given me the book that Mother used to read to me when the long days were over. It was a beautifully bound book with gold leaves, full of stories from long ago, and I found it gave me a special comfort to remember Mother reading it to me. We travelled all over Europe, and I have always had a talent for languages, and I became quite the asset. It became my task to read and translate the charters and chronicles that we came across whenever we went to a new town. They were often the sources of our plays, always topical, often political, and always raunchy, all relayed to the populace in comical ways. Any subject was free game to use in our plays as long as it made the audience laugh, whilst parting with their money at the same time. I had found my niche, and was appreciated for it, although I wasn't sure if Pulcinella sometimes felt pushed out by my popularity. It sometimes playfully referred to me as my good woman, or my lady, but everything I did was for us, Pulcinella and our future, and it made me happy to be able to do my part. 11th of May 1979. Dear Diary, I've been using my tapes from Dr. Goodwin and found them really helpful. I'm just not sure if I want to go to the next session. I've agreed to do the full course of 10 sessions though, and my next appointment is in a couple of days. I want to be able to tell him how I've been getting on with the tapes. Although I enjoy the first 2 basic tapes, I'm having issues with tape 3, the one that says to start with a good memory. I end up having not so nice dreams, and although I can't remember them, I end up feeling rattled all day. I need to ask him about that. I'm sure he knows what he's doing. I'm just not sure if I want to remember anymore. The one tape is about lying on a beach, and I love that one. The other uses numbers on a screen and is intended to teach me how to go into a trance at will, simply by taking deep breaths and telling myself to sleep or relax, visualizing numbers from 1 to 10. The higher the number, the deeper the state of relaxation. I've not really given this a try, but I have 2 days to practice. Case Notes, Session 7, 13th of May 1979. Client seems to have learned the technique of putting herself into a deep trance state at will. She has experienced difficulties with induction 3, i.e. using her own good memories, and has voiced her concerns. We spent some time discussing her diary entries and her dreams. I believe we are now knocking on the door of her subconscious. She's experiencing signs of her subconscious fighting. For some it will be not finding time to listen to their tapes. Joan has fought this impulse and forced herself to listen to her tapes, which shows commitment on her part. I've explained that the doubts she is feeling about completing our sessions are completely normal. Other signs of the subconscious fighting could be feeling unwell, maybe cold or flu-like symptoms that give her excuses to use for not listening to her tapes or not attending appointments. I could only advise that she takes control of her own mind at these times and ignore the excuses. The subconscious is like a child. It only sees things in black and white. There are no grey areas. So all the subconscious will know is that something hurt her. As she has indicated that she would prefer to put herself into a deep trance, I've advised her to instruct her subconscious to release the information slowly in a safe, controlled manner, or through her dreams if she prefers. She has agreed to keep a note of anything relevant. We have agreed her next appointment should be in 4 weeks' time. 13th of May 1979. Dear Diary, Alison came round today, and I told her about my visit with Dr. Goodwin. She had found a book on hypnosis and regression therapy and suggested I read it for myself. One thing she's learnt about me was that I can be a bit of a control freak, and she felt I might find it helpful to understand as much about the topic as I could. I sat down to read it this evening, and the name James Braid was mentioned. He'd written a book on magic, witchcraft, animal magnetism many years ago. I remembered the title. There was a vague recollection of seeing a copy of the book. I wonder what happened to it. I'm usually so good with books. I fell asleep thinking about the book. I must have dropped off, for Pulsnella's angry eyes appeared in front of me, this time revealing more of his face. I sat up sharply, wide awake, suddenly remembering the last time I'd seen him. It was the night I was hospitalised, the night I was told I almost died. Pulsnella and Nicholas had been fighting about that very book. I tried not to remember that fight. Pulsnella and I had been having a few marital difficulties, and I was having trouble coping with his mood swings. I'm not sure, for I've not seen either of them since, but Nicholas must have said something to a colleague, for he brought this book round for me to read, the one by James Braid. I remember reading the name, and then Punchinella returned home. He was already in a foul mood, saw the book on the table, and not only threw the doctor out of the house, but threw the book on the fire. An awful fight ensued. Well, next I knew, I was waking up in hospital.